What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero, because World War III is a really bad idea. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show. It is Monday, July 2nd, 2018, getting into July here, just 2 days away from Independence Day. And we've got a lot of stuff to talk about. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, ready to answer the phone, put you on the air with your comments and questions. And I want to start out today with kind of a little sort of personal anecdotal situation, because as you know, Claire and I took a slightly extended weekend just to try and unwind. And the first thing that was obvious was nowhere near enough. I need like a whole week off at this point. But Friday, we cinched up Claire in her back brace, and we went on out to the windward side, which is where we lived when we first moved here all those years ago. And it was rather shocking seeing how much it had deteriorated. And how bad the roads were. We had said we're going to go to the windward side because the roads over there are good. Well, not anymore. There were some major potholes, which of course makes it very uncomfortable for Claire to ride. And then on Saturday, we went up the leeward side, which was even worse. There was this one bridge. We literally had to slow down to like 5 miles an hour to get across it. So it really is all crumbling away in front of us. And I understand one of the reasons why they don't have the money to pay for the roads is this light rail project, which is billions of dollars over budget, years behind schedule. There's a big fist fight going on over an audit to see where the money went. And HART, which is the administrative body governing the construction of this project, which is being pushed by the Agenda 30 people, they don't want to have an audit, which tells me something has gone wrong. And they've poured so much money into this. There are people on this island who are saying it's never going to work. They're never going to get it up and running. And even if they do, it'll never pencil out. It's going to have to be subsidized. And it only serves the southern shore of Oahu from sort of kind of in Honolulu. It was supposed to originally go all the way to a station at the Ala Moana Shopping Center, which is the biggest shopping center on the island. Now they're going to stop it at Baker Street and have a fleet of buses to take people to and from the shopping center. And the other end of it is out in Kapolei, which is this kind of Stepford-ish development, but it's in good shape. And the idea being that Kapolei was built up years ago to try and draw some of the overcrowding away from Honolulu. And because of the H1 freeway, that really hasn't worked on out. Now, there are people living out there, some very nice residential areas, and some nice shopping malls. It was actually the first time we drove around Kapolei and really got a chance to look at it. And it's a very nice place, but it's underutilized. And I think that's a big part of what the light rail is supposed to do, is make it easier to get back and forth from Kapolei to Honolulu. And of course, it stops at all the big tourist venues and shopping malls all the way along the south coast. But it's not going to serve the northern part of the island at all. And yet the northern part of the island is kind of paying for it with all this money that is not being used to take care of the roads and everything. Now, the one good side about being up on the windward side, there's a place up there called Kualoa Ranch. If you come to Oahu, you might want to make a point of visiting this place. Claire and I have known about this place for many, many years. In fact, years ago, we did some radio commercials for them. And they have been growing, and it's really become a very nice place. And you'll probably recognize it if you come take the movie tour, because a lot of the Jurassic Park movies were filmed there. There's a horse ranch. You can go horse riding. And we went up there specifically because our friend who's in the Honolulu Police Department said they had an organic local beef market. And so that made Claire very happy, and we went up there and we got some stuff to put in the freezer. So that was our weekend, and yesterday we just kind of collapsed. But it wasn't enough. I really do need an entire week off. Anyway, getting on into the news here. Judicial Watch has uncovered additional hidden Peter Strzok emails in the latest production of the Clinton Lynch tarmac meeting docs. And this latest email is suggesting that the decision not to fully investigate and not to prosecute Hillary Clinton was made all the way back in April 2016 before they'd really gotten into the investigation. They just got together and said, no, she's untouchable. We can't touch her. She'll bring the entire government down with her. And again, getting a huge stall. The FBI had originally informed Judicial Watch they couldn't locate any records related to the tarmac meeting. However, following a Freedom of Information Act lawsuit, the Justice Department said, oh, these documents over here. Of course, yeah. I mean, now that the judge has ordered it, you can have them. And so Judicial Watch is just doing yeoman's work, and they're doing a lot of good stuff over there. All right, we're going to do a shout out now to our honor affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. I'm going to get myself a swig of water. It's very dry here today, especially with the fog. So in an unrelated case, Judicial Watch has won another court victory. District Court Judge Reggie B. Walton has now ordered the Justice Department to begin producing records about Department of Justice communications involved with Fusion GPS, which was the organization that sort of data laundered the Christopher Steele dodgy dossier. And Judge Walton basically got very harsh on the Department of Justice. He rejected a DOJ request to begin producing documents 6 months from now. And he said, no, you do it now. If you're claiming you don't have enough of a staff to do this, then you hire more staff. And he repeatedly criticized the Justice Department during a hearing back on June 14th. So I think a lot of people, even within the government, they've really had enough of this song and dance and the stonewalling. And there's a bit of a faction fight, if you will, that is looming between the Department of Justice and the FBI and pretty much the rest of the government. And at some point, I expect we're going to see, hopefully, the administration and quite probably the Congress slap the Department of Justice and the FBI down real hard and say, hey, you work for the American people, and you don't have a right to keep this stuff from us. So there's still a bit of a fight going on there. And ranking Republican senators are now calling on the Department of Justice to appoint a second special counsel to investigate abuses by the FBI and Justice Department employees connected to their role in the investigation into President Trump. Well, I wouldn't trust anybody appointed by the Department of Justice. I think Congress ought to appoint its own special counsel. I don't know where the legal framework for that would be, but I'd get Larry Klayman up there. I would definitely get Larry Klayman up there. Something has to be done. And we can't go on with this idea of the Department of Justice investigating itself or the FBI investigating itself. We're going to get absolutely nowhere. So this is coming from Senate Judiciary Chairman Chuck Grassley. Senator Lindsey Graham finally did something good. Senator John Comen and Senator Tom Tillis. And they're joining with other congressional members to say it's time for a second special counsel to work alongside the Department of Justice Inspector General Michael Horowitz, who has been conducting, as you know, an investigation into the matter for more of a year. Now, Horowitz has released a few interesting things, but we know that his report was incomplete. The entire second appendix was removed from it, and he was under pressure to soften it down, and he did. It's a classic limited hangout. Yes, we committed these small infractions, but we're going to keep the really nasty stuff hidden from you, the American people, but the investigation is over. We've done our job. Democracy has prevailed, blah, 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 and they move on from there. Now, a little bit of disturbing news here. Former Trump lawyer Michael Cohen is hinting that he may turn on his former client to earn favor in the court of public opinion and with Robert Mueller, who's leading the ongoing investigation into ties between the Trump campaign and Russia. At least that seems to be the appearance from an interview that Cohen did on ABC, where Cohen said in response to George Stephanopoulos asking if he'd be loyal to Trump, Cohen said, "My wife, my daughter, and my son have my first loyalty and always will. I put family and country first." So he's implying it. He's not actually saying it. The question is, what can he say without violating attorney-client privilege? Because he could say something about Trump that Mueller would like, and in the process, he could destroy his own career. Because if you have a lawyer who violates attorney-client privilege, nobody's going to hire him ever again. That's going to be it. Now, as you know, Donald Trump is getting ready to pick a new Supreme Court justice, and Justice Kennedy steps down end of this month. He's retiring from the bench. He's still going to be involved in the court in an undefined senior capacity. Still wants to go to the building, but he wants off the bench. And apparently Trump's administration has started with a list of 25 potential picks. Now, apparently, they're down to just 2. And over in the Senate, I mean, they're obviously very concerned that Trump is going to pick, first of all, somebody very young who will be on the Supreme Court for decades, and somebody who's going to be even more conservative than Kennedy, who every once in a while would switch over to the liberal side. And apparently the big issue is Roe versus Wade. And the Democrats, of course, like to campaign on that, you know, the women's right to choose. And so there may be a fight brewing in the Senate where Senator Collins has already stepped up and pledged to oppose any nominee who does not promise to uphold Roe versus Wade. So there may be a little bit of a fist fight over there in the Senate. All right, now, let's get into the war zones. A lot of stuff going on. Apparently, militants in over 15 different settlements have just surrendered to the Syrian army. And it is a stunning victory in the battle against Hayat Tahrir al-Sham and their allies in southern Syria. And over the last few days, government forces have liberated these 15 settlements in the eastern and western countryside of Daraa. And basically, the militants agreed to surrender. No more fighting. Here's our guns. We surrender. And it's looking more and more like Daraa is on the verge of being liberated. At least 10 of the villages have already signed the reconciliation agreement, and the militants are preparing to surrender. Now, because the Syrian army is down in the south of their own country, Israel is getting very nervous, and they have started arming and fortifying the Golan. And they're out there sending a message to Assad not to enter the demilitarized zone. And apparently there was an agreement back in 1974 after Israel grabbed the Golan, saying there is a demilitarized zone that neither side can go into. And Israel's army has sent tanks and artillery, heavy artillery, to the Syrian border yesterday morning. And this amid a renewed offensive by Assad's forces and the Russian military against the remaining rebel holdouts in Syria's southwest. Now, I hope that Assad isn't going to retake the Golan, even though that's his territory, because that would give Israel an excuse to go back into Syria in an offensive way, which in turn would give the United States an excuse to escalate the war in Syria, get it going again. I don't think the U.S. government really is ready to give up on Syria. Now, the U.S. ambassador to Estonia has resigned over Trump's comments ahead of the upcoming NATO summit, and basically said, James D. Melville Jr. said he's resigning because of the comments that Trump made, basically blasting NATO. And Trump had made a comment that the EU was set up to take advantage of the United States to attack our piggy bank. Well, Trump is correct in that the United States pays most of the costs of NATO, and Trump campaigned on making the members of NATO pay their fair share. So the ambassador may have just be getting tired of his job. But Trump has a valid point. Why are we policing the world? Why are we paying for it all? Anyway, we're going to take a phone call now. We've got Joe in Tennessee. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I really hope Trump picks Amy Barrett as the Supreme Court justice, and I'll tell you why.
Okay.
I don't know too much about her judge career. I know she's on the Court of Appeals, and that Feinstein attacked her because of her Catholic faith when they had a Senate hearing on her appointment to the Court of Appeals. There is nothing that Trump could be better for Trump than to have a bunch of left senators attack a Catholic woman with 7 kids, by the way,
yes,
being appointed as the Supreme Court. I mean, he won the election because of Catholic votes in Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and at the same time, we'll have Feinstein attacking a Catholic nominee. Meanwhile, we have 4 Jewish Supreme Court justices, and nobody would say a peep about that. And not that I'm against that. I'm just saying if turnaround's fair play. If Feinstein wants to get ugly and dirty and bring up somebody's religious affiliation, why does it not apply to the Jewish justices also? I mean, that's pretty disproportionate to have 4 Jewish justices on the Supreme Court, don't you think?
I would absolutely agree, but I'll tell you one other aspect of this situation. If Trump appoints a female Supreme Court judge who's anti-abortion, that's going to pull the rug out of the pro-abortion movement that always screams that anybody opposed to abortion is anti-woman.
Well, that's the whole beauty of this appointment is how it's going to really highlight everybody's hypocrisy, and that's really the main reason why I'm all for it. Besides the fact that she's young and she went to Notre Dame, so we're getting out of that Harvard, Princeton, Yale club, and anytime you do that to me is a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
Seven kids, that's got to ground her in life, that's got to make her understand like reality, not just some having your head in the clouds person, educated person. Having kids really grounds people.
Yes.
And I think that'd be wonderful for the country. It's a little bit different. 7 kids, my God.
Yes.
She's doing her job.
Got her own soccer team.
Yeah, I guess so. But anyway, that's all I got for you today, so thanks.
All right, thank you for the phone call, Joe, and we're going to let you go. It's going to be an interesting thing to watch as this comes on up. And, Trump is going to move very quickly on this. I don't think he's going to want to take the chance that the Democrats, by hook or crook, will take control of Congress. So we should see something happen. In fact, I think he said he's going to announce his pick for the Supreme Court on the 9th. So he really is moving fast on this. Okay. Now, getting on over to North Korea. Over the weekend, we were seeing all these stories about how North Korea is still working on building up the nuclear facilities. They're working on this, they're working on that. And it turns out that these stories may be a little bit less than accurate because there is a campaign underway to sabotage the potential of peace with North Korea. And members of Congress and officials at the CIA are trying to throw a monkey wrench into these negotiations. So apparently these stories are coming from members of Congress and the CIA. They're leaking to the corporate media about an intelligence assessment on North Korea's nuclear facilities, and the result is a sensationalized piece that includes actually no new facts. But they're out there, oh, it's coming, North Korea's going to nuke us. Anyway, we're going to take a break here for commercials, and we'll be back with more news after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And we're talking about what's going on regarding North Korea and how we're beginning to see signs of an organized campaign to try and derail the summit between Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un. And there's sensationalized stories based on old information being fed to the corporate media. And over at NBC, one of the authors is Ken Delanian, who's well known for his tight cooperation with the Central Intelligence Agency. Longtime observers of the corporate media understand that the corporate media has been co-opted by the CIA by Operation Mockingbird, which dates all the way back to the end of World War II, when they studied exactly how the Nazis were manipulating their corporate media and said, hey, we got to do that here. So we have this other story that came on out from Zero Hedge. CIA teams up with defense industry to undermine Korea negotiations. Because the last thing in the world the defense industry wants is peace. There's no money. There's no sales. Defense corporations try and start wars. It's called creating demand for our product. And apparently factions within the CIA attempted for the second time in just over a month to undermine Donald Trump's peace overtures toward North Korea by leaking information calculated to decrease confidence in Kim Jong-un's willingness to earnestly negotiate. And again, they were using NBC to do this. So a lot of the stuff that we saw coming on out about North Korea still building that, North Korea is still upgrading their nuclear facilities, is propaganda. It's propaganda. Now, North Korea is appealing to China for economic assistance, and it has reopened a radio channel with the South. And this is a maritime communications channel. They reopened it about a week ago. So now vessels of the two countries can communicate with each other and make sure they're not going to like run into each other. This is a major gesture. I think Kim Jong-un is seriously thinking that his best path forward is reunification with the South. So they're normalizing maritime communications. That's a very good sign. They're allowing people in the North to visit family members in the South from whom they've been separated since the start of the Korean War. These are all very, very good things. Now, John Bolton is out there saying that he believes the bulk of North Korea's weapons programs could be dismantled within a year. And North Korea and the U.S. have resumed the working level talks. Now, there's a little hitch in there because John Bolton, when he was on CBS's Face the Nation, he keeps throwing the ballistic missile programs in, which was not the issue going into the talks. It was the nuclear weapons. But Bolton wants to push for the ballistic missiles. And I think North Korea may balk at that because without long-range ballistic missiles with conventional warheads, North Korea doesn't have a deterrent to being attacked by, well, just for example, the United States of America. Getting on down to Israel, the bloodshed along the Gaza border is continuing. And apparently there was a young boy, Yasser Abu al-Najah, and he and a few friends took cover from the Israeli snipers behind a waste container well away from the front lines of the protest in the Gaza Strip. And he made the mistake of peeking his head out from behind the bin, and one of those expanding bullets hit him right in the head. He was 11 years old. And his killing on Friday made him the 16th Palestinian child to be shot dead by Israeli forces since the launch on March 30th of the Great March of Return protest, calling for the rights of refugees and their descendants to return to the homes and farms they were violently expelled from in 1948. 11-year-old kid. And an IDF sniper shot him from a protected location from hundreds of yards away with one of those expanding butterfly bullets. And Israel wants you to think they're the ones under threat. They're afraid of a couple of kites and balloons. Therefore, one of the world's mightiest militaries, including nuclear weapons, has a right to go on in and just start gunning down little kids. They don't really. You know it. I know it. They're behaving as beasts. Let's just call it what it is. These are war crimes. All right, we're going to take another break here for commercials, and we'll be right back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're talking about what's going on down in Israel and Palestine. And over in the West Bank, one of the illegal settlers set up an outpost on private Palestinian agricultural land. Now, the settlers took control of approximately 20 dunams of land, and I don't know the conversion to acres, but it's a big chunk of land, in the town of Bani Na'im, near Hebron. He's been there a couple of weeks with a tent and a herd of sheep, and Palestinians are protesting his being there because, A, he's an illegal settler, B, it's not his land. But they can't do anything about it because the settler is being protected by an Israeli military force. So they're just taking whatever they want. That's what Israel's idea of Middle East peace is. I want peace over there and a peace over there, and we're going to have a piece of that one over there. Now, in the village of Khan al-Amar, Israel occupation forces are basically getting ready to expel the population of the village and then tear it all down. According to Israeli human rights group Bet Salam, said that Israeli occupation personnel basically walked through the town among the residents' homes in what appeared to be preparations for a planned demolition. Of course, it set off the children crying and everything. The town is notable for having what's called an ecological school that was built entirely out of tires, and that also is slated for demolition, and for some reason they also counted the flocks of sheep. All right, let's take another phone call here. Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha, Dustin. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. I keep going back to Trump. The CIA and the military-industrial complex is undermining North Korea. Well, he put in the new CIA director. It's just mind-boggling to me.
It's like everybody in Washington, D.C., they're all so corrupt, he can't find somebody who's going to do the job he wants to get done. He needs to start bringing in some outsiders, people from outside the Beltway.
Yeah, like way outside the Beltway, because, I mean, it just boggles my mind. Everybody, he put in John Bolton. The guy's undermining it. Like, why the hell would you keep this guy there if he's undermining you? So something else is going on
apparently that
here.
was a favor. That was a favor to Sheldon Adelson, who was one of Trump's largest backers in the election. I mean, when you go into that Oval Office, that has to be the most uncomfortable chair in the world, because every time you sit in it, you are reminded of all the favors that you owe all the people who put you in that chair.
Yeah, well, that also includes the Make America Great Again crowd.
Unfortunately, we seem to be at the bottom of the ladder of getting things done for. What really alarms me is Trump has to know that the independent media and the internet were a major factor in his victory, and yet he seems to have turned his back on us completely. In light of all these recent laws that are being passed to try and shut us all down, and attacks on our revenue streams and everything. So another way that I'm disappointed in him.
Well, yeah, because Sheldon Adelson's been probably with him for a while. It just didn't come out of the thin blue. It didn't just appear in front of him. So that means he duped us from the beginning, because Sheldon Adelson had to be there from the beginning, right?
Oh, yeah, no question. Sheldon Adelson was there at the beginning, and I know that one of the ways in which Trump owes a lot of big favors are the people who helped him through the bankruptcies that he went through early in his business career, because he did crater a couple of times, and some other billionaires stepped on in and said, we're going to give you a hand up and get you started again. And then when he became president, you know, they all pick up the phone and say, do you remember back when I helped you save your casino or your hotel or whatever? And Trump will say, yes. And the backers will say, well, I need a little favor.
Call Icon, Resorts International, all that other stuff. Oh, yeah, I mean, like, hey, Mike, did you hear anything about, the White House denied this about Trump maybe pulling the military out of Germany. Did you hear about anything on that?
I've been hearing that Trump is saying he wants to start pulling some of our military out of some places where they're not really doing anything other than sitting around polishing their bullets. And how far he'll get with that over the objections of NATO and the Pentagon remains to be seen. But we're dealing with an unpleasant reality here in that we don't have enough people to fight all these wars that are being fought. I mean, if Bernie Sanders is to be believed, the U.S. is militarily engaged in 76 countries around the world, most of which we don't even know about. And at some point, they're going to have to start some very careful planning on relocating some of these military forces from areas where they're not actually needed at the moment to places where they're doing whatever it is they're doing in these other countries.
Yeah, I wonder how many countries Rome was in the British Empire, if anybody knows that, at that particular time, I mean,
that was a big reason that Rome came down. I mean, they were having to garrison their entire empire. When they lost the 3 legions up in Germany, they literally did not have enough troops to police their empire. And the outer provinces started breaking away.
And Mike, real quick, I just switch gears on CNBC. I don't agree with them like 99% of the time, but did you see the new article says, corporations buying their own stock back is the only thing keeping the stock market up, and that tells you, you've been saying it all along. It's like a big Ponzi scheme. I mean, they're telling you it.
Yeah.
Basically,
corporations are buying their stock back because if their stock is out and there's a crash, there'll be a panic. But we've known about corporations using all this extra money they've been getting from the Federal Reserve to buy their stock back and basically pull back. A lot of them are talking about, taking the companies private.
But then nobody's building no infrastructure. They're not building any new factories. There's no infrastructure work going on in this country. And then I hear about, that company Indian, they make the motorcycles like Harley Davidson. They're moving to Poland or something. I mean, this country's a shell of what it formerly was. And Mike, it's not coming back. It's plain as day.
Well,
it's never going to be like
we're in serious trouble here. Now, supposedly, last word I heard is that Ford is going to open a new auto plant up in Detroit. At least that's what they've announced so far. And it is response to Trump's tariffs on foreign-made cars. Because it turns out that American companies, who are doing their manufacturing overseas and then they bring the products back, they're still hit with the tariffs. And so Ford is taking a gamble, and they're going to try and get a new car factory up there in Detroit, which is a good thing. It's a good thing.
And Mike, real quick, if I have any time left, I want to mention, remember Volkswagen with the EPA thing, with the diesel engines weren't what they said they were for the mileage and all that?
Yes.
Did you know a couple days before that, or a couple weeks before that, they opened like a new plant in Russia to build like engines?
I'd heard about that. Now, the good news there is the laws in Germany are different than here in the United States of America. And some of those executives who were involved in that decision to hack the software on the car to cheat the EPA tests are going to go to jail.
I'm just saying that, Mike, because we're always saying how there's people like the world's ripping us off or it's not fair. This is the kind of dirty tricks your own government does. It's economic warfare. You know, I mean, it's a plain as, it's just sad. I mean, free trade, fair trade, what a bunch of bunk. You can say it and you don't mean it, because like it's all about money. It doesn't matter if it's from us or somebody else. It's just about trying to get ahead of the next business or guy. How sad though, like this kind of with the sanctions, just economic warfare. So you keep the other guy down while we keep ahead. But things are changing. You know that. Things are changing, and it's going to be for the worse for us, unfortunately.
Unfortunately, I fear that you are correct. And very often, that's what these so-called trade negotiations are all about, is negotiating for other countries to be in a disadvantageous position relative to the U.S. economy. And yeah, much of the U.S. prosperity going through the 60s and 70s really was a case of actively seeking to undermine the economies of other countries. And of course, back in the 60s and 70s, especially the 70s and 80s, we had the advantage of the tech boom. And then very foolishly let all that technology go be manufactured in other countries. Are you there, Dustin? Okay, we seem to have lost Dustin. All right, so, oh, he hung up. Well, how dare he? The crust, the nerve. Okay, getting on back to Israel, Netanyahu has ordered the approval of the second and third reading of the Jewish state bill before the end of the Knesset's summer session. Now, the bill was approved at its first reading, 64 in favor, 50 against, and basically it is a bill that will make it national law in Israel that they are a state for the Jewish people. In other words, they're codifying into law an apartheid state. And I can understand why so many people voted against it. There's going to be a lot of condemnation around the world. Getting on back to the violence down on the Gaza border, there have been 128 violations committed against Palestinian journalists in the occupied West Bank and Gaza just in June, just in last month. And the Committee to Support Palestinian Journalists revealed yesterday it has documented 54 violations committed by Israeli occupation forces and 74 by Palestinian security services against Palestinian journalists in June. And you have to start wondering, whose side is the Palestinian Authority on? Because they seem to be trying to keep the Palestinians down rather than help them improve their lives. But according to this report, Israeli forces attacked 17 journalists in the Gaza Strip and the occupied West Bank, including directly assaulting media crews as they covered the Great March of Return. And journalists were left with a variety of injuries as a result. The report documented 9 cases of arrests and detentions, including the detention of a foreign journalist in Jerusalem, 4 cases of raiding journalists' homes, and 3 cases where journalists' personal property, including phones and cameras, were confiscated. So Israel's not big on freedom of the press, either in Israel or, for that matter, even here in the United States. Australia has now announced they're ending direct aid to the Palestinian Authority. And Australia explains it away by saying this allows the PA to pay Palestinians convicted of politically motivated violence. Now, there's no proof that that's going on. In fact, as I mentioned in the last story, lately the PA seems to be more on the side of Israel than on the Palestinians. They're putting down protests, they're putting down demonstrations, they're attacking journalists, but Australia just decided we're going to cut off the money. And this, of course, comes on top of Donald Trump cutting funding to the Palestinian Authority. And the United Nations is basically saying this is a crisis. The United Nations Palestinian Refugee Agency could run out of money for programs within weeks. And they're saying this will be a humanitarian catastrophe and make life impossible for many Palestinians. So this is something I definitely do not agree with Donald Trump about doing. Europcar has divested from the Israel occupation. They're this European car rental giant, and it shut down its Israeli franchisees' branches in the occupied Palestinian territory. This is coming from the American Friends Service Committee. And apparently, after becoming a franchisee of Europcar, Israeli company Albar terminated its businesses in the occupied West Bank, and AFSC announced Europcar thus joins other multinationals that have ended operations in illegal Israeli settlements. So more and more people are getting on with BDS. Over in India, their defense council has approved the purchase of the S-400 air defense missile system from Russia, despite arm twisting from Washington, D.C. The U.S. government wanted India to buy THAAD. This is our THAAD. This is a really good system. But as we have been seeing demonstrated over Syria, the S-400 appears to be superior to that here. Now, down in Mexico, as you know, they had their elections. What a bloody campaign that was this year. 134 people killed, including a number of candidates. But apparently, there was a landslide victory. Too big to steal the election, and Andrés Manuel López Obrador basically swept the elections. And they're saying, they're still counting, but they're saying, yeah, he's going to win this one. Now, a lot of people are saying this is going to be Donald Trump's nightmare, and it is, because this gentleman campaigned, this is the guy who was campaigning that migration to the United States is a natural human right. So there may be a bit of a kerfuffle between Trump and Obrador regarding that issue, because Mexico is in serious trouble. One of the reasons Obrador won is the Mexican people are very angry over corruption, violence, the out-of-control drug trade, which has led to more violence. And Obrador is out there saying, well, we can't fix the problems. We're just going to open up the gates and let you go to the United States of America. So we're going to have, there's going to be an issue at that border. There will be an issue at that border. Now, as you know, we're coming up on this summit between Putin and Trump, and a lot of people are not happy about that at all. More after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. So we're talking about the upcoming summit between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin. And there are a lot of people who are not happy about it. Certainly the defense industry was just drooling over the revival of the Cold War, where they get to make these insanely expensive weapon systems, which they sort of kind of hope never actually get used, but they look good during the testing. And there's a lot of money there. And the globalists are in a panic because a deal between Trump and Putin could basically derail the push for a global government. If Trump agrees that we're going to go back to a bipolar world where there's the United States and its allies and Russia and their allies, it's going to make it that much harder to try and bring both the U.S. and Russia into an eventual one world government. So, again, Trump, in many ways, is like John F. Kennedy. He's surrounded by enemies who do not like his policies. Now, speaking of the defense industries producing junk, you would think after all these years that the oxygen system in a fighter airplane is an established, mature, stable technology. And then all of a sudden we had the F-22, which for some reason is asphyxiating its pilots if they go too high. And now it turns out the same problem, or a similar problem, has hit the T-6 training aircraft. And right now an entire Air Force T-6 training squadron in Texas has had to pause operations because multiple pilots reported physiological episodes, which is a fancy way of saying, I think I'm blacking out, with the aircraft's, they call it OBOGS system. which is the onboard oxygen generating system. Okay. A little bit of entertainment news. Normally I don't do it on this program, but this was too good to let go. Harvey Weinstein has been charged with yet another assault on a third woman. This is strike 3. And right now, he could be looking, if he's given the maximum sentences, he's going away for like 30 years. So this is over in Manhattan. They filed criminal charges against him. And I know it's a complex issue. And I got to see a lot of it when I was working in the entertainment industry. But it's nothing new for rich, powerful producers to exploit their position. And plenty of young women who are willing to go along, hoping they're going to get a starring role. Even Marilyn Monroe had to do the nasty early in her career. All right, we're going to take a break for commercials, and we'll be back with hour 2 after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Now, up in Portland, they had, Oregon, they had a bit of a kerfuffle where there was a pro-Trump demonstration, and they encountered an opposing group associated with another rally nearby, mostly of Antifa. And neither rally was directly related to the immigration policy, which drew peaceful protests elsewhere across Portland and across the country on Saturday. But apparently, somebody on the Antifa side had managed to get hold of a flashbang grenade. That's not something that you can go down to the local store and buy. And they hurled it into the pro-Trump group, and they 4 people had to be sent to the hospital. So we're seeing a lot of this violence is continuing to escalate. A lot of people are still criticizing Maxine Waters for inciting that violence. Judicial Watch is demanding an ethics investigation for Maxine Waters. Over the weekend, apparently Maxine Waters was getting threats to the point where she had to cancel an event. So, little taste of her own medicine there. All right, let's take another phone call. Bob, behind enemy lines, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, brother. How are you?
Doing okay.
Oh, good. Hey, actually, this is a really good pointed time for me to interject on this with my phone call. It's almost, I don't know, divinely inspired. I know only your wife would agree with that, but you're talking about this big protest that was happening up in Portland.
Yes.
Did you hear about what happened on late Friday night outside of one of the campus bars?
No, I did not.
Okay, there was a Portland State University officer-involved shooting, and they shot and killed a licensed concealed carry Navy veteran who was trying to break up a fight outside of a bar.
Yes.
He got kind of pushed over, his gun fell out of his holster, and when he reached to pick it up to make sure nobody else could use it to commit a crime, the police officer shot him in the back multiple times.
Ouch.
And it's just a great example of what's going on in our country right now. I mean, I really do hope sensible heads prevail. And I'm sorry, I'm losing my voice a little bit today. I hope you forgive me for that. But I'm just, you know, being a staunch Republican and a Christian and somebody who really believes in the Constitution, not to mention I served in the Navy myself, so this really hit me personally. And, you know, being a veteran myself, having taken the oath to uphold the Constitution against all foreign enemies and domestic enemies, it's getting to the point where I'm starting to wonder if maybe the police force in our country, in some respect, is starting to become an enemy of the people. And that's, I have to be reserved in explaining to you that I have got family members who are police officers, and they do their job. They do it correctly. They also have a lot to say about their coworkers who are not doing their jobs correctly. They're turning human misery into revenue generation.
Yes. Yeah, there's a lot of that going on. Claire and I are very lucky here in Oahu. This Israelification of the police has not reached out here yet. And the police out here are very nice.
It will.
Very polite.
It'll get there. It's a cancer. It's a cancer. It'll get there.
Well, we've had one unfortunate incident, and this happened, I think, about 2 years ago. We have very strict laws regarding marine mammals. And if you're going to come out here and visit, it's one of the things you need to be aware of. You're not allowed to approach and touch a marine mammal. The fines are just astronomical. Now, if you're swimming and they come up to you, that's a different story. But the state literally does have people watching the beaches and watching the oceans to make sure that the mammals are not being harassed. So anyway, on Waikiki Beach, and this was about 2 years ago, there was a dolphin who had been injured and was just lying on the beach and wasn't going to make it. And one of our traditional indigenous Hawaiians knelt next to it to pray for it. And there was this police officer who came on up and said, back away from the mammal, back away from the mammal. And apparently this indigenous Hawaiian didn't move fast enough because the cop shot him. But that's the only ugly incident we've had here in Hawaii. And like I said, we've got a neighbor who's HPD, who's just a wonderful person. And we're very lucky that these problems haven't come out here yet.
On the force. Most of them are good people. Like I said, I've got family on the force. Most of them are good people. Hey, if I don't mind changing the subject just a minute, I hope you don't either. I need to ask you as a follow-up to something that I called in about, I guess about a week ago.
Yeah.
I gave you a possible video platform replacement for YouTube when you and Claire were on Friday before last. Did you look into Real Video?
Yeah, I'm looking into it. I mean, that's the one that Natural News has started.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I am going to be looking at moving all of my videos from YouTube over to Real Video. I need to see if they have a streaming service. I really haven't had the time to get into it yet, but if they have a streaming service, I'm definitely going to...
They do.
They do. All right. Well,
I certainly do have a live streaming service. Do I get the opportunity to actually pat myself on the back that I led
well, don't dislocate your shoulder, but go ahead.
I'm trying my best to be a Rivero Ranger here, and really your best interest is in my mind because you're keeping my mind well informed.
Well, thank you very much. And I'm going to get to that Real Video. I did some work here in the office over the weekend. Those of you on the camera can see it's a lot neater and nicer over here. But I am going to look at that because I do need, I get all kinds of complaints about noise on the YouTube feed, and I do need to look at fixing that.
Well, I'm glad I was able to help. Look, when you clean up the studio, just do me one favor and put that gecko back up on the wall. I miss that little guy.
Well, that's up to the gecko. It's not like I've got him trained or anything like that. But they do show up every once in a while. And it's now little gecko season. So we have to be very careful when we walk around that we don't accidentally step on what we call micro gecks.
Oh, boy. You know, I never even thought of that part. I'm sitting out here in California, like I said, surrounded by the liberal stink. We don't have any geckos here. I'm kind of almost jealous. Hey, anyway, I'm going to get out of your hair today. I'm really glad that I was able to give you some good info on the Real Video. And just in case I don't call in, maybe you can spit a blurb in one of your shows here. I listen to them all the time. So if you just spit out something telling me how well it worked out, I'd like to know. I'd like to at least know what I suggested is going to do something useful for you.
Well, I will look at it probably on the coming weekend. Where Claire and I, our lives are just starting to kind of get back to normal after what we went through, first of all, with her injury, and second, with the Honda being stolen and stripped. And it got kind of crazy, and that's why we took these 3-day weekend off. Which wasn't enough, by the way.
They didn't mean to do this. No, the Russian friends, they didn't mean to do this. They were drunk on the beach.
That's right. Vladimir Putin owes me a car.
Well, actually, I understand pretty fluent Russian, but it doesn't mean I'm a Russian bot. It also doesn't mean I'm a co-conspirator to, help Trump get into office and, sodomize Hillary Clinton out of her position of power. Oh, man, I'm telling you, the cultural aspect of today's society is actually quite lacking. I really hope sensible heads prevail. Hey, I'm going to get off the phone. I'll go ahead and listen to the rest of your show. You have a great day, brother.
Spasiba.
Spasiba.
All right. We're going to switch over to Mark in North Carolina. Aloha, Mark. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. Mike, a couple of things. One is Trump wants to succeed. I believe his problems now are both misinformed and in a lot of ways he just doesn't have the courage. He doesn't have the courage, first of all, to take on a deep state. What he should do, I think I told you that before, is he should get a bunch of military troops, Army, Marines, whatever, let's say a battalion, raid the FBI, CIA, the Justice Department, the IRS, seize all their records and computers, and then get good investigators and people who understand computers also and things, and go through it with a fine-tooth comb and then start arresting some of these traitors once and for all. He needs to fire Rosenstein. For one, he can fire him right away. I believe he should also fire Mueller. And I'm not sure about
I think he needs to fire Sessions. Sessions is just another cover-up artist in a row. And Trump really needs to start thinking about pulling in some people from outside the Beltway for some of these key top positions.
He should have used Dave Clark, for one thing, the director of the FBI. I personally believe the FBI should be dismantled. But in the meantime, a guy like Sheriff Clark, who's a constitutional peace officer, a constitutional sheriff, would have been excellent for the job. The other thing is he also needs to get these Zionists away from him, okay?
Yes.
This Kushner is nothing but bad news. They're going to cause problems. They're causing problems with foreign policy. Bolton is nothing but a shill for them. I don't know what he's done with, I don't know how well he set up this meeting with Putin. I'd trust him as far as I'm concerned. Well, I'm sure Putin understands that too about Bolton. He's got to get rid of these people, and he's got to get our troops out of all these places. I know he wants to get us out of these places in the Middle East, in Europe, wherever else we are. Bring them home and start cutting that defense budget. It's not a defense budget; it's a police the world budget. Then we can have some of the things I think personally, I'm not a socialist or anything like that, but I think national healthcare system, if it's done right and funded properly, would be excellent. I think it's a good idea. Peter Lavelle was on. I don't know if you know who Lionel is. He's on YouTube.
Yes.
One time he was maybe a talk show. Peter Lavelle from Crosstalk, so he was on there quite a bit, and he recently was on it a few days ago on Lionel's show, and Lavelle was describing the Russian healthcare system. It's excellent. Read everybody, and it's excellent care. He had cataracts removed, no cost except $2 to buy eye drops. Lavelle. He had his teeth. He had a bunch of teeth replaced. No charge. It's included in the taxes, and they only pay like 15% income tax. And it's certainly not a communist or even a socialist country anymore. So, things like that. But they only pay 70. I don't know how they have such an excellent military, but they only pay $70 billion a year on the military. But somehow they seem to do it. Okay, and excellent weapons and everything else.
Well, that's because our military-industrial complex is a racket, just like Eisenhower warned us it would be.
Yeah, but how much of a racket could it be? I mean, over $1 trillion. Then again, Russia's not in wars all over the world either. So,
True.
They've learned that. They learned a lesson from the Soviet Union, from Afghanistan and places like that. They don't want to dominate all these places. People think, and then I heard some idiot, I think his name is Ron Johnson, senator from Wisconsin the other day. He was saying, well, we should try to get along better with Russia, but Russia's such an aggressive nation all over the world. They're pushing their aggression all over the world and stuff. I said, I was yelling at the radio. I said, you dummy. I was driving to Charlotte that, between music and listening to radio, listening to news and stuff like that. I said, you dumb, you know what? I mean, do you really believe what you're saying? I mean, if Putin wanted to, he could have taken a whole Ukraine probably in a 24 or 48 hours. He didn't take Crimea. Crimea wanted to become part of Russia. He didn't even take the eastern Ukraine. I think he should have done, personally. My own opinion, I was Putin at that time. The East would have been part of Russia. But, you know, he tries to be as moderate as possible, you know, he's as restrained as possible.
Yes.
And this clown says, you know, says that. So, I mean, this is what Trump's got to understand. He's got to get rid of these neocons. He's got to get rid of these globalists, and he's got to crack down on the defense, not only defense, more important, the intelligence establishment. He's got to crack down. That FBI's got to go. There's no reason to have this thing. He certainly should defang them and defuse them. The same thing with the CIA. These people are more and more arrogant, dangerous, unconstitutional. There's nothing in the Constitution calling for all these federal police agencies. Just the opposite. That's what Trump's got to understand. And then he'll be successful. Otherwise, they'll bring him down. They will bring him down. If he keeps it up, if he keeps letting them get away with what they're getting away with, they'll either get us, you know, engaged in some kind of a war somewhere, maybe with Iran, or they'll just sabotage him some other way. Maybe bring the economy down purposely, which I suspect they're trying to do already.
I disagree on that one. I think their problem is they can't hold it together.
You think so? I don't know. Because the economy seems to be going pretty good now. If you look at some of these economic shows and stuff like that, I can't really say. I don't know whether jobs are better paying today or more jobs available or what. They say there are. You probably know that better than me.
Yes.
But I do think whatever good he's doing in the economy, I personally think the deep state wants to bring it down. They want this guy out. They hate populism. They're scared to death of what's going on in Europe. That's another thing, too. U.S. and Russia would cooperate. First of all, you would take criminals like Erdogan and Netanyahu, and they would put them in line. They would say, look, you're not going to be doing this stuff. You know, you're going to, they'd set parameters for what these guys would do. And they'd listen because the two superpowers get together and tell them, hey, enough is enough. They would also, Europe's talking about starting their own army, forcing countries that don't want to go along with their program of, flooding their countries with so-called refugees. They would be talking about using force with a European army. Again, if Trump and Putin acted together and laid down a law, they wouldn't even think of doing something like that. And the good thing is, Russia is not a globalist country. They're not for globalism. They're a very nationalistic, patriotic nation today. And Putin Putin and Trump do have a lot of things in common. The problem is, Putin has got control of his intelligence and military and all that, military industrial, whatever military industrial, but Trump doesn't. That's the problem, in a nutshell. Other than that,
the other thing that Trump and Putin are probably going to talk about is, of course, Syria. And if they make a deal there, the military-industrial complex is going to be very unhappy with that as well. It's another missed sales opportunity. They're
ready.
Say again?
I'm saying they're already starting trouble with the Korean deal. They're already a military-industrial complex or whatever is trying to, sabotage that.
Yes.
So you're right. And the Iran deal that's a disgrace. It's also costing us at the gas pumps, making gas more expensive. There was no reason for that. Iran is no threat to us. And again, it's design. He's listening to the Zionists. He's including his dumb son-in-law, and he's listening to a guy like Sheldon Adelson, who I believe is up to me. These billionaires would have a lot of their wealth confiscated. I'd have a tax system would tax not only their income but their wealth, so they wouldn't be so rich and they wouldn't have so much power. The problem is, you get these billionaires with all this money, and then they have power. Then it gives them power and influence, and they eat everything up around them. I call it predatory capitalism. Some people say crony capitalism. I call it a predatory form of capitalism. It's as bad as communism, really. It's the extreme. It's the extreme of one side of the capitalist extreme as opposed to the socialist extreme, which is communism. That's basically and that's where we're going with this kind of stuff. When you have these oligarchs with that kind of, with that kind of power, like a bum like Adelson, it's
or
got to
George
stop.
Soros.
Yeah. Soros, so of course, how can I forget Soros? But most of these guys, both on the left and the right and in between, they want it their way the highway, and then they buy off these politicians, and they have their way. So
Anyway, Mark, I'm going to have to let you go. We got another commercial break here. We got more callers waiting on the line, and we will be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, and a much belated shout out to our on-air affiliates who have rejoined our network here. We're going to go back to the phones. Mo in Florida, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Michael. Haven't called in for a while, and I just hope you don't mind if I shift a little bit to the economy. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, I know it's not new news, but it just sometimes the little things just grab you. I've got 3 bank accounts and a brokerage account. Not much left in them anymore these days, but I had my wife make a deposit of about $300 to Wells Fargo a couple weeks ago, and they wouldn't take the cash deposit. I just couldn't believe it. And the reason they gave was, because it could be drug money. Can you believe that?
I mean,
$300?
That's just, I wouldn't do business with a bank that won't do business in cash.
Well, they're all doing it now. I've got PNC, I've got them, Wells Fargo, I've got, another bank, and they're all, in other words, if I deposit it myself, because it counts in my name, it's fine. But my wife can't deposit $300 cash into my account because it could be drug money. They're worried about this. They're worried about this cash thing and a run on the banks, right?
Well, I know that's the ultimate goal of the cashless society, is to protect the banks from their depositors in the event of an economic downturn.
Yeah, can you imagine? They're not going to take a $300 deposit because it could be drug money. I mean, that's the exit. They say, we just have rules, sir. I mean, this is somebody. I can't deposit $300 in your account. I want to give it to Mike Rivero. I want to put it in your account. I can't do it. Because I'm not the account holder. Are you kidding me? Cash, government money. This is so in your face. Sometimes things are so silly and obvious that it just goes by everybody. Am I right about that?
Yeah, I mean, to me, that's utterly absurd. First of all, they're basing a decision on something that might be, now if they had some kind of a scanner and scanned the cash and it tested positive, that might be another issue. Of course, in our current druggy society, most random bills have traces of drugs on them right now. But the idea that they're going to say, we're not going to let you make a deposit to the account because it might be drug money, I mean, that's return to Code Napoleon. You're presumed guilty until you can prove that you're innocent.
Yeah. I can't deposit 10 $1 bills in your account, in a Wells Fargo account, Chase, Manhattan, everything else. I can't deposit 10 $1 bills in my name into your account, cash, because I'm not the account holder. They're just, Mike, they're just trying to. They're really worried about a run on the banks and cash. They're trying to get rid of cash and take us to a cashless society. That's why I see it. Anyways, I won't take up any more of your time. I love the show, and you do have the smartest viewers. I'm not counting me, but everybody else. Thanks.
All right. Well, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. The phone lines are open right now. I mean, that is really getting very heavy-handed. And again, my problem with the cashless society is the potential for surveillance, obviously. Not the government's business. If I stop on the way home from work and get a jelly donut, I don't want them to know. I'm a very private guy. Then we keep hearing about all these cyber criminals that are out there breaking into bank accounts and stealing money. A lot of people can be justified in wanting to keep some of it at home where it's going to be safer. And again, and I have witnessed this myself several times in recent months, these systems will shut down. Claire and I went through the Wendy's near her church about a month ago. Big sign up front, cash only. Machines are down. I've seen it happen twice at the local Safeway. I don't want to be dependent on these electronic systems because they are becoming unreliable. Now, this is the part of the show where we talk about the economic news, and the tariff wars are escalating. Europe is now threatening the United States with new tariffs worth $300 billion with a B as this trade war continues to escalate. Now, one of the things we've been talking about on the show is the student loan problem, where students are being lured into college with promises of high-paying jobs. Support for students in college has dried up. Nowhere near as many scholarships available, and the costs of college have soared way out of proportion with the rate of inflation. It's very expensive to go to college, and so they have to get these student loans. Now, we're going to take another break here for commercials, and when we come on back, some new realities regarding this college issue. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here, and we're talking about the student loan problem. And the problem is that these kids are coming out of college. They have college degrees. The jobs are not there. A lot of people with college degrees are working in occupations that have nothing to do with their college degree. And the colleges are churning them out like assembly line to the point where there's actually a glut. And as a result, college graduates are not doing all that well between the student loan and the unavailability of jobs for which they're really qualified that would be high paying. But there's a new phenomenon. So many people are going to college and getting college degrees. There is now a shortage of what would be called the vocational working class, people who know how to fix engines, lay pipes, do electrical wiring. And oddly enough, they're starting to make more money than college graduates because they're in demand. And they don't have the student loans to be paying off. So they're actually coming out in a better situation. All right, let's take some phone calls. Chris in Las Vegas, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Chris, are you there?
I am, Houston.
Oh, there you are.
I am here. Sorry about that. Thank you very much for having me. You had just mentioned about the contamination of the information pool related to some of the other things you were just speaking of, and I'd run across the same thing. It appears that some of the fallout from the Obama administration, and who knows, maybe before, has resultantly placed me on the terrorist watch list without any foundation or basis whatsoever. And it was very disturbing when I discovered it, although I had suspected it about a year ago whenever I saw some very anomalous and curious behavior from a clerk at the Metropolitan Police Department records section here in Las Vegas, acting very strangely and drawing her finger slowly across the bottom of the screen to point out to her overseer or watcher or trainer to her attention of something anomalous. And I got a chance to see it in the back seat of a police car while I was handcuffed on the 8th of June. And what it said was, in great big red letters, I'm talking an inch to an inch and a quarter tall, and about that quarter of an inch thick, HOT hot 10 number PW Terror Watch 8. And I've sort of extrapolated from what I've seen written in a lot of the different pleadings and informations and so-called beliefs that they put out, that apparently the 10 must be relating to me being a violent, presumed threat to law enforcement, or maybe to officials, allegedly. And the 8 appears to have some suggestion I might be suicidal. However, I'm going to assure you I am not a suicidal individual. Somebody else is trying to invent this, perhaps to give the pretext to, I would call it Mossadicide me and claim that I committed suicide when I had no intentions of doing any preposterous thing whatsoever, because I have a higher duty to somebody else in the creation than mere men here on earth, and don't have the ability to take myself off. So these databases of the NCIC and even international databases are likely rife and irrefutably polluted with unauthenticated information that has not been properly vetted by fair, neutral, independent, but are being put in there maliciously to color an individual with a shade of criminality when there's no fact pattern basis whatsoever to support any such nonsense.
Well, it's no secret that the terror watch list, 90% of the people on it shouldn't be on it. But you know, it's funded. There's money flowing, and in order to keep the money flowing, they keep putting people on there. And it's just a matter of, you know, looking like you're busy saving the world from terrorism. And as I understand it, sadly, there is no mechanism to remove yourself from the terror watch list once you're on it. There should be.
Yes, there should. In fact, the FOIA request, apparently the agencies do not have to honor an individual request to inquire into the reasons why they may have, you know, strictly found them listed as such a terrorist on these databases. Although if you can relate yourself to a news agency or something, then you may be able to look at First Amendment violations and freedom of speech and free press, and based upon that agency that you may work with, even as a casual, sometimes submitter of story content, you might bring a case under their auspices and be able to project a FOIA request, Freedom of Information Act, through the Department of Justice or maybe the FBI in some cases. I've found a very close association here to the so-called Southern Nevada Joint Terrorism Task Force, which is an assimilation of federal and state powers, which is a very dangerous concept in violation of the Pinkerton Act and the Brown Act. If those do a little due diligence to investigate those, bringing the federal nose underneath the state sovereignty tents to bring in their federal agents to work with locals is a very, very dangerous concept of freedom and liberty in my estimation.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree. I absolutely agree. And some of the stories I've heard, people get put on that terrorist watch list just because they annoyed some TSA worker at the airport. There are no controls. It's just anybody gets a feeling, you go on that watch list.
Well, I'm definitely there. One other thing I thought I'd address, you had mentioned you don't have a lot of corruption on Hawaii. Well, I've observed it here in Las Vegas, too. Generally what happens whenever you have a criminal case against government actions or agency actors that work under the scope of government authority, they generally put it under seal instantaneously or claim national security to hide the criminality from the people that are in the local areas. But I happen to know of a case over on Honolulu in particular. It was on the Honolulu News. I think your station is HNL 13, or I forget what the number is that follows it. But there's a case there called Puana, P-U-A-N-A, versus Kealoha. Mm-hmm. I'm not real good on that spelling, Kealoha, but that was Louis Kealoha, the former chief of the Hawaii PD, and his wife, Catherine Kealoha, who was the deputy district attorney there, violating the separation of powers doctrine by assimilating the executive with the judiciary. And so, or with the enforcement division. And of course, this is very dangerous. And this is exactly the same thing I've run over here in Las Vegas, where Steve Wolfson, the chief district attorney, was, of course, married to his wife, Jackie Wolfson Glass of the Wolfson and Glass law firm, who was serving as a specialty competency court so-called judge in their mental health program ruse, where I was violently attacked by one of their special agents they brought in for having the audacity of articulating a Supreme Court decision with extreme specificity in their court, and violently attacked by 6 thugs and spirited away to do 30 days in a Class 3 prize zone, which is called a mental health care facility up in Sparks, Nevada. And of course, 30 days later, I was let out because they deemed me to be very competent and knew it was a political ruse, basically to send me up there to get me out of their hair 400 miles away, so I couldn't defend myself.
Well, it is a corrupt system, and I didn't say that we don't have corruption here in Hawaii. We have, unfortunately, probably as much as any place else. What I was saying to that other caller is we don't have the problem with the out-of-control violent police that you have on the mainland, but definitely there's a lot of corruption. We were talking about that light rail system and how a huge amount of money has vanished into it, and there's a big fight going on now over an audit. And there are these grassroots groups that are out there saying this is public money. We have a right to know where it's going. And HART, which is the organization that is supervising the project, is fighting tooth and nail not to allow the audit. So something's going on over there. And, you know, Hawaii's kind of interesting, especially Oahu, because it's a combination of big city corruption and small town mindset. And it can get a little awkward at times.
This is one of the uncommon aspects that very few people observe clearly. I know you're sharp, so you probably noticed it. But usually what we find, these are public funds, but they're going for private purposes. And usually these private corporations that run the government try to give the illusion that it's for the public benefit, when really it's precisely benefiting special private interest, usually with somebody in their own family, if not their own direct private interest, is what I've found.
Well, it could be, but it's very obvious right now to a lot of us here on Oahu that the light rail project has been badly mismanaged. They've had to go back and redo things that weren't well thought out at the beginning. They're having to completely replace all of the existing rail cars because the frames are cracking, just all kinds of stuff like that. They're having to redo the supports for the stations because the contracts for the supports for the station were let out before the plans for the stations were completed. And they just took a guess on how much this was all going to weigh. And of course, the final design for the station weighs a lot more. So they're having to go back and fix those again. It's just clearly mismanaged from beginning to end. And there are people in this island who are saying they don't think it's ever actually going to be finished. They don't think it's ever actually going to run. And even if it does run, that it'll have to be publicly subsidized.
That sort of harkens back to the beginnings of the country when they had the Union Pacific Railroad that started out supposedly as a government-funded railroad project, went bankrupt, and then it was funded and purchased for cents on the dollar by private interest of large wallets. And we've been suffering from that ever since. And now they want to talk about the bullet or speed train. I think it'll be another government boondoggle, and we'll all suffer the consequences of having our money spent for it to enrich private interest. Thank you so much, Michael. I'll let myself go. Have a beautiful afternoon. Aloha.
Aloha, nui nui. And we're going to switch over to Fred in Arkansas. Aloha, Fred. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Okay. Thank you very much, sir. I have a suggestion for you to generate revenue. And that is, I think you need a petition wall where people could start a petition at Republic Broadcasting at your website for like a $50 donation. Then what I think is people could either sign the petition, or if they liked it a whole lot, they could donate money towards the petition. And then when the donations got up to say like $200 or $250, you could print out the petition and put it in an envelope with a stamp and mail it to somebody important. Now that would give you, the broadcaster, you could talk maybe 10 or 15 minutes an hour about the petitions on the petition board and ask people to call in and say, what do you think about this petition? What do you think about that petition? And you might, this might be just, you know, what I'm saying is sort of like a GoFundMe, but it's a GoFundMe for a bunch of people who want to express right-wing political opinions. And you're the right location for that. I have no idea how to do I can't program. I don't know HTML. But there's got to be somebody on your team who could convert your web pages to petition pages, and maybe the money would roll in then. What do you think?
Well, sounds like an interesting idea. Of course, this is going to be up to John Stedmiller if he wants to try this. And what you're suggesting isn't that difficult to do. It's basically a form or forms. and I imagine it would be a separate page, a sub-page for RBN. But it's an interesting idea, and I hope Mike was taking note of it, and we'll share that with John Stadmiller.
Okay, now wait, let me say one more thing. I went to a petition site where I was fooled, and I spent the time writing a petition that I wanted to free Puerto Rico and make Puerto Rico a separate country. Well, I didn't read the fine print. It turns out to get your petition up on the page, you have to start off with 75 signatures, and I don't know 75 anybody's. So in other words, you have no competition, Michael. You see what I'm saying? There's nothing out there that works like this. And if you go, there are petition websites, but they have this loophole where you have to start out with 75 colleagues who will sign for you. Whereas if you did this and you said, okay, send us $50 and we'll let you set up a petition, and then you take more donations, nobody else is doing that. So you might have a real big scoop on all the talk shows in the United States. You know what I'm saying? It could go, and it's not going to cost you anything to try it.
Well, like I said, it sounds like an interesting idea, and hopefully Mike was taking notes here to share with John Stadmiller, okay?
Okay, thank you, sir. I'll get off.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. The phone lines are now open. Getting on back to the economic news. Article coming out over here from Goldcore. As the currency reset begins, get gold as it is where the whole world is heading. And it's basically saying the same thing that I've been talking about for quite some time. When you have a debt-based currency, there's no limit on debt creation. And the way private central banking is set up, the debt grows and grows faster than the available money supply. And sooner or later, it all starts coming apart. You get into Zimbabwe-style inflation or Venezuelan-style inflation. It's really out of control down there. Now, politicians love the current system because they can buy votes from the citizens. Central bankers love the system because of the power and prestige it brings them. Citizens love the system because they get handouts, bailouts, pumped up asset values, and other goodies seemingly for free. But of course, there's no such thing as free. Now, I've been watching the gold prices lately. They are trending down, no question about that. But I see that as another indication the gold prices, and for that matter, silver, are being manipulated. Because we're hearing about all these major gold purchases being made by China and Russia. The demand is definitely there. But gold prices are being kept down because the powers that be don't want Americans closing their savings accounts or emptying their stock portfolios and getting into precious metals as a store of wealth. But you ought to be thinking about it. You really, really ought to be thinking about it. Okay, Trump administration appears to be preparing a bill allowing the United States to circumvent World Trade Organization rules. Now, late last week, Treasury Secretary Mnuchin rejected allegations that Trump wants the U.S. to simply pull out from the World Trade Organization, but they are hammering out a bill that stipulates that Washington may actually abandon fundamental World Trade Organization rules. This is coming from the website Axios, which said it had obtained a draft of the bill. Now, if approved by Congress, the bill, which is called the United States Fair and Reciprocal Tariff Act, would provide Trump a license to raise U.S. tariffs at will without congressional consent. All right, we're going to take another break for commercials, and we will be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And apparently, the possibility that Trump may pull the United States out of the World Trade Organization is having some chaotic effects on Wall Street and primarily the Federal Reserve. Because this will be a major, major change. They're fearing loss of influence, loss of profit. Speaking of panic, Deutsche Bank, which recently failed a stress test, they are in a panic mode. Their stock is near a record low, and apparently people are, in fact, pulling their money out of Deutsche Bank. Now, as you know, Deutsche Bank has been caught in recent years with all kinds of economic skullduggery, and people are concerned. They're concerned that it could collapse, and it is one of the biggest banks in the world. But again, some of what they've been doing is not well regarded, as it were. Another story coming on out, this is from Blacklisted News. Why are investors pulling money out of the global stock funds at the fastest pace since the last financial crisis? The obvious answer is they think another one's on the way. And we haven't seen anything like this since the crisis of 2008. Investors are pulling their money out of global stock funds at a rate we haven't seen in 10 years. And a lot of people are thinking this is a harbinger of tough times ahead. Now, if you look at the stock market, not just today, they ended slightly in the green. But if you go back over the last month, you will see there has been a big, big problem. The plunge protection team is trying to keep it up, but the market is very much in decline right now. Over in South Korea, automaker Hyundai is saying that U.S. car tariffs could harm security ties over North Korea. Now, Hyundai Motor is basically worried that Trump wants to impose a 25% tariff on imported vehicles from South Korea. And Hyundai is saying this will hurt the security alliance between the two countries over North Korea's nuclear ambitions. Now that's interesting when you have a car company that's out there saying tariffs on our vehicle threaten our national security, which is basically what they're saying. Now Iran, as you know, likes to sell oil. And the United States government has been arm-twisting countries to stop buying oil from Iran. And China remains in the nuclear deal. They're going to be buying oil. They're not going to give in to U.S. demands. But Iran has come up with a different way to go. And that is they're going to sell oil to private companies to get around the U.S. sanctions. Apparently, they've worked out a little pipeline where they can get the oil from Iran to where it needs to go under private ownership, and they'll be able to keep selling their oil. We got to take a break for commercials. Back with Hour 3 after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And we have a caller on the line. Terry in California. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, Mike from North Carolina, you know, we all agree with what he said. You know, I think Trump ought to do all that stuff. But my question is, does he have the power to do it? I mean, or is the deep state really in control and there's nothing he can do regardless of putting on his presidential brass knuckles, as you say? I mean,
well, part of the problem is he's getting bad advice. When he was talking about firing James Comey, he was actually told by a White House lawyer that the president couldn't fire the director of the FBI. And Trump went with that, and then later on he found out he'd been lied to and fired James Comey, and now that lawyer who misled him on his ability to fire James Comey is now head of the DEA.
And what's he going to do about it? I mean, is he just going to let him go? Who knows, right?
Apparently. I mean, I wish Trump would put on those presidential brass knuckles because he does have the authority to fire anybody in the government who is not doing a good job, who's not doing what he's being told to do. But it does seem like Trump, he's playing at being president. He's certainly doing a lot of travel around the world. And he looks good in his suit and his hair and his spray-on tan. and he's doing things for show, like the summit with Putin and the summit with Kim Jong-un. But I'm really not seeing a lot of change.
But so your answer to the fundamental question is yes, he does have the power to do this stuff. If he,
But he just
only
isn't.
would know the facts and use his, power to do it. He does have the power to do it. He's stronger than the deep state. I mean, he can do what he wants as within the jurisdiction of the president.
Yeah,
Right?
absolutely. He's head of the executive branch. Everybody under the executive branch, he's the boss. And that includes
Right. I mean,
FBI and Department of Justice.
Yeah, and foreign policy as well. I mean, he can say all of a sudden we're stopping all these wars and we're making peace with Russia and all that kind of stuff, right?
Yep.
I mean, what about the influence these people have? Like he'd be in trouble with Israel if he pulled out of Syria, obviously.
Yes, he would be.
And he'd be in trouble with, all his contributors, APAC, and the guys from the casino guys from Las Vegas and all that kind of stuff. But he could do it, but they'd probably get him. There'd be retaliation there if he did that, right?
Yeah, probably. You're absolutely right. I mean, and it's still amazing how Mueller is trying to find something they can get Trump out of office. If they fail at that, I am gravely concerned that there will actually be an assassination attempt on Donald Trump.
Well, he obviously knew there was a danger of that because, like you said before, he's got his own security in addition to the Secret Service in there, right? I guess it's still there.
Yeah, I presume it's still there. It ought to be still there. In many ways, Trump is like John F. Kennedy. He's surrounded on all sides by people who do not like him. He's surrounded by people who do not like his policies.
And he could even reopen these investigations on the JFK thing and 9/11 and all that if he really wanted to throw some chaff out there.
Yeah, he could in theory, but again, he's got to be careful whose ox he gores.
Exactly. Right. Okay, Mike, just wanted your thought on that. Appreciate it. And I'm going to sign off and let you get to the next caller if there is one.
Not at the moment, so we're going to go back here to the news. Getting on over into Europe, the whole immigration refugee thing is really starting to heat up, and a lot of people are, there's a big pushback. Right now in Germany, 43% of Germans want Angela Merkel to resign over the refugee issue. That's a larger margin than she was actually elected with. Remember, when she was elected, she had to form a coalition government. Well, 43% of Germans want her gone. They want her to resign. Here in the United States, there's a new poll from Harvard-Harris. 84% of Americans support turning illegal immigrants over to authorities. We're just getting tired of all this nonsense. Over in Bulgaria, their prime minister, Boyko Borisov, is saying the migrant crisis can be solved if the EU can seal its external border, detain illegal migrants already present, and deport them back to where they came from. So there is this growing pushback all over the EU. All right, we're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates or just rejoining the network. Apparently, there is another story here about a Muslim migrant who slit the throat and stabbed to death a Belgian boy. The Belgian boy was 19 years old, was trying to protect a waitress that this migrant was harassing. The guy was just he basically was groping up the waitress. This 19-year-old stepped in to try and protect her, and the refugee pulled the knife, cut his throat, and stabbed him to death. Now, up in Sweden, as you know, it has become the rape capital of the world. because of the refugees pouring in there. And according to this article in Breitbart, nearly half of women in Sweden's vulnerable areas feel unsafe after dark. So that nice, relaxed European feel is now gone. They're just as urban paranoid as anywhere else in the country, and with good reason. Now, there's a new party forming in Sweden called Alternative for Sweden. I guess it's modeled on Alternative for Germany. And their platform is restoring the natural right of Swedish people to their country. And they're running on a platform of rounding up the refugees and sending them back home. They're saying it will take years to do. But their attitude is only the Swedish people have a natural and honorable right to this country. We are the host people and the indigenous people, and they are guests. But apparently they have been very rude guests, behaving improperly. Over in Croatia, a mob of 200 migrants attempted to storm the Croatian border, shouting Allah Akbar, and they fought with police who deployed tear gas against them. But behind them, according to the Croatian Interior Ministry, there are 60,000 migrants currently making their way through Greece, then Albania, Montenegro, Bosnia, and finally attempting to cross into Croatia. So it's become a major, major problem. Over in Colorado, as you probably know, they had some major wildfires, dozens of them, and it turned out they were all set by an illegal immigrant, 38,000 acres of land destroyed, along with a lot of homes. And he's looking at arson charges. After they deal with that, he's being turned over to the Immigration and Customs Enforcement. All right, let's see. Apparently the liberals are still going on about the children being separated from their families at the border. And it's time to just realize the parents are at fault here. The parents committed a crime stepping over the border, and they are being detained. If you commit a crime in this country, you steal a car, you shoplift something, you rob a convenience store, you're going to be detained. You're going to be locked up. And no, they will not let you take your children with you. That's just the way it works. And this policy of separating the children from the parents for their safety goes all the way back to a law and a lawsuit under the Clinton administration. Clinton was separating children from the parents, nobody said anything. Obama was separating children from the parents, nobody said anything. It's only when the Democrats needed a distraction from Michael Horowitz's Inspector General report that all of a sudden it was a big issue. But as that poll I just talked about indicates, the Democrats are raising on a busted flush on the immigration issue because the American people have just had it. They've had it with the crime, the contagious diseases, the costs of it all. Now, the French ambassador has had a confidential note leaked that basically praises the Prime Minister of Hungary for trying to close the borders and says that Muslims in France and Germany are anti-Semitic. So, meanwhile, here in Washington, D.C., nearly 600 Women's March protesters were arrested at the Senate building. This happened last Thursday. This is a group that wants to abolish the Immigration and Customs Enforcement. They want the total open borders, just let them pour on in. That's what they want. And I wonder how many of these women have an illegal immigrant living in their home right now. So they're out there with their signs, abolish ICE, and we care, we care. All right, let's get into some of the science news here. We talk about GMO all the time, our concern with a very dangerous technology that is being marketed before it's really fully understood. Same thing that we saw with vaccines. And of course, the GMO companies are out there trying to insist that farmers who are growing GMO crops can keep them contained on their farmlands. There's a 10-foot buffer zone that you put around your fields, which is a lot of usable soil. And you're promised the GMO pollen won't leave it. Well, that hasn't worked out. There have been cases of GMO contamination from states away because that pollen blows on the wind. It's carried by insects. It's carried by birds. And up in Ontario, Oregon, right near the Idaho border, they've had another issue on their farmland. There is a GMO grass designed for golf courses, and it is apparently spreading rather rapidly and starting to intrude on farmlands. Another little oopsie there. All right, let's talk about computers and assorted things. Over in Austria, a court has ruled that YouTube can be held partly liable for copyright breaches in videos uploaded by its users. This is a ruling that will have a lot of implications. And apparently, Vienna's commercial court said that YouTube had played an active role in spreading such content and therefore could not claim the status of neutral intermediary. Now, here in the United States of America, owners of websites so far have been protected, where the courts are saying, especially for smaller websites, it is simply unrealistic to expect that everything will be policed by the webmaster. But as you know, Europe just passed this draconian copyright law, which basically says even altered copyrighted material cannot be put up there. And now in Austria, they've ruled against YouTube. They're declaring a war on what makes the internet the internet. Now, for corporate media, this, of course, is what they want to see. They don't like the idea of people entertaining themselves, talking back and forth. They want to turn the internet into just another content delivery platform with commercials and paid programming, and it's always about the money. And that free and open internet that we remember from back in the 1980s and 1990s is rapidly going away. Now, as you probably know, home and business security is big business because of the crime. And over in Britain, in Leicestershire, there was this owner of a pub, and he contracted with a security firm called Swan, who put in a closed-circuit TV camera inside his bar. Now, the advantage of some of these new systems is you can monitor your place of business or your home from your smart device. In fact, I've got a friend who's got a property down on the Big Island that was being subjected to vandalism by some of the neighbor kids. And he got one of these where he could literally whip out the phone and take a look at the home anytime he wanted. And if he saw anything, he could call the Big Island police here. Well, that's the way it's supposed to work. But over at this pub, the Bradgate, the owner, Mick Hopley, was rather surprised when somebody walked on in and said, you know, I can see your bar interior on my smart device. In other words, Swan was sending the image to the wrong customer. And the owner was understandably upset, saying that if this video is going someplace it's not to, we could have criminals who see where we, keep the money. And instead of providing security, it opens up a big, big hole. So somebody missed testing the system fully before they installed it. Now, Brian Brackeen, who's CEO of facial recognition company Kairos, has a message about the technology his firm develops. He's saying it is not yet ready for use by the police. It's too volatile. And in an editorial for TechCrunch, Brian basically explains that artificial intelligence algorithms that are powering facial recognition need massive amounts of data to function. And in his experience, these systems have not been given enough data on people to function properly. And he's saying if it is used in law enforcement, and it's already being used in law enforcement, that malfunction could mean wrongful identification of an innocent person. And this has been happening ever since facial recognition started coming on board. They started putting it in airports, looking for hijackers. I think one of the first tests was down at the Miami airport. And they got hundreds and hundreds of false positives and not one real confirmed hijacker. And I have a lot of respect for this CEO because he's taking responsibility, saying, no, it's not ready for prime time yet. We need a little more time. We need to get it to work. We need to make sure it'll work before it goes on out there, which is an attitude that we see less and less with products in this country that are sold at the stores before the kinks are out. I mean, look, every time Windows rolls out a new operating system, it comes out with thousands of known bugs that they'll get around to fixing somewhere down the road, okay? Now, this comes from the category of you shouldn't do this. Apparently, over in Middleton, Ohio, there has been a spike in home invasions where they're targeting people who on social media are displaying large sums of money. People, you can't do that. You can't do it. It made them instant targets. All right, we're going to take a break for commercials here, and we'll be back in just a few minutes. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're talking about the subject of computers here. And for those of you watching on YouTube, this machine back here is the one that's running Windows 10. And one of the things I did over the weekend break was to start to really try and get into it and understand it. It is a major readjustment coming out of Windows 7, but I figure at some point Claire and I are going to have to make peace with it. But I really do not like it. All right, we got a caller on the line. Brendan in San Francisco. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. Just checking in. Been listening every day. I'm trying to be more selective about calling in. Just wanted to make a recommendation to you and the audience. I don't know if you're aware that Dan Bongino, former Secret Service to the Clintons, has his own radio show now.
Oh,
it's a
okay.
1-hour broadcast, and he's got some really deep, insightful stuff going on. He's been doing some forensic analysis of this Russiagate, and he does have some insight that I'm not hearing anywhere else. So I'm using him as a bookend to your show, and I'm always looking for other stuff. But SGT Report's been doing some good stuff, but I highly recommend Dan Bongino. I stumbled upon it by accident, and I just wanted to share that with you. The stuff that he's getting is just so behind the scenes, it's ridiculous. And I guess he still has contacts with the Secret Service. But his analysis is par excellence, man. I recommend it. Have a great show. Talk to you.
All right, thanks an awful lot. Well, I'd like to get him on my show if that was at all possible. Okay, getting on back to the computers here. And once again, Facebook has been accused of leaking users' personal information via a quiz app over a period of at least 2 years. And this is almost looking like Cambridge Analytical. Facebook has been accused of leaking the personal info of their users through this quiz app. And the application is called nametests.com, and it's been running Facebook quizzes for years, but the application left the personal data of Facebook users who have used the app unprotected on its website, leaving the info vulnerable to third parties who may wish to steal it. It's like these big companies don't care. When they get too big, you know, so your data got stolen. We don't care. We don't have to. We're Facebook. Over at the National Security Agency, they have started to delete 685 million call records dating back to 2015, which the government got from telecommunication companies in connection with investigations. But as it turns out, apparently a lot of this material was not legal to obtain. So the NSA, which of course is dealing with a huge PR problem because of all the spying, is now going back on in and cleaning up the database. Part of it may be public relations. The other part of it is when you have that much data, how do you make sense of it? That's been the weakness in all this total information awareness right from the start. Is how do you derive anything meaningful from all that data? Maybe that's why they never really caught any terrorists here. So a lot of people are starting to say that it may be that this data collection program has outlived its usefulness. Maybe they're finally looking at it and saying, we actually can't make sense of all this data. So they're saying that technical irregularities resulted in the production of some call records the NSA was not authorized to receive. I believe they're deleting all those records. I really do. Honest, true here. Over at Twitter, the Department of Homeland Security has served Twitter with a subpoena demanding the account information of a data breach finder. Now, this is somebody who goes on out and he finds where these huge amounts of data are left exposed. Now, he goes by the handle Flash Gordon, and apparently the Department of Homeland Security, rather than dealing with the companies that are exposing all the data, has just decided that maybe it's better if he just shuts up and stops calling attention to where the data is exposed. Because obviously, along with people who are outraged at the exposure, there could be criminals as well who are following him and saying, oh, here's the data, we're going to go grab it. But that's what they're doing. Department of Homeland Security wants Twitter to out this guy, goes by the name of Flash Gordon, because he's out there working as a white hat security expert, finding where this data is just being exposed and mishandled. All right, we're going to take another break for commercials. We've got a caller waiting on the line, and we will be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Let's go to the phone lines now to Rob in Illinois. Aloha, Rob. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, thank you, Mr. Rivero. How are you today?
I'm doing well.
Well, that's very good. I'm glad to hear it. I'm going to confess right off the bat, I haven't been listening to your broadcast in a little bit, but I did tune in today, just right around you're talking about Windows 10, Windows 7, and then it went on to, you brought up the thread with the FBI deleting data. Could you please, I know you passed it up, could you please revise us on that so I can get into that? Because I like to refresh everyone's memory of what you just reported.
Okay, this is where the NSA, and this may just be a publicity stunt, but they've started deleting something like 685 million of the records they collected as part of their "we're going to grab it all" surveillance, and it was all claimed to be part of investigations. But according to this article, they're saying that some of these communication companies that were working with them sent them data to which the NSA technically was not allowed to have. And so now they're just purging it all out. So just look on my main page and search for NSA.
Well, technically, all the data that they're collecting should be technically illegal, but they're collecting it anyway, and they have been for many years.
Yes.
Now, there is specific dates. It's like 2012 through 2016, is it not?
It's actually everything collected since 2015.
2015. Well, I heard a reference that it was 2012 to 2016. Now, maybe there's a separate article being written about this and more other details of information. But what we have here, Michael, is an incident, because basically Trump, this whole thing with all these treasonous, these people that committed sedition and all this stuff, these people all believed Hillary Clinton was going to win the presidential election, and she was going to be president, and there was going to be no investigations whatsoever. So these people were the sloppiest, just sloppy.
Yes.
I don't know, I want to use other words, but just put it this way. These people were sloppy. They were using open BlackBerries. They were emailing. They were texting. They were making phone calls on all these phones and whatever. All this data is out there. You got Rod Rosenstein won't give up what they keep requesting of him for what, almost a year, nearly a year now.
Yeah.
So protecting this, they don't know what to do with it. So now they just got to they can't go through it all. They can't just pick out, because it's everywhere. It's been everywhere. There's been a predicament since the beginning, right?
Yes.
So they just got to dump it. So it's the FBI that's actually doing this. Now, but here's the key point. It's the NSA that has it all. The FBI can go and do whatever they want. They got 37,000 members of this FBI, and how many of those people were part of this big collusion, not to mention of other branches of government. But the NSA has it all. And the president and his forces, his white hats, are making sure they have it all. So let the FBI go and delete their little hearts out, because they have it all. That's the real story. This whole publicity about, we're going to do the right thing and delete it because it wasn't right to do. Come on, Mike, you know better.
No, I do know better. And like I said, to me, it feels like a public relations stunt.
Well, yeah, because they have to make up a cover story to why all of a sudden this information is missing, and then all of a sudden when they want certain things, well, what about this communication between this? Oh my gosh, we don't have it anymore. You know what? It must have been within that 685 million bits of information. We're sorry, but no, forget it. Forget sorry, because guess what? The NSA saved the day because they're the guys behind the guys. You know what I mean?
Yes.
That's where we stand. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense, but we also know that the NSA did have all of Hillary's emails, including the deleted ones, and they went to James Comey and said, do you want this information? And Comey said no.
Of course he did. No, he didn't, because he's like, no, they were trying to cover it up. They wanted Hillary to win, no matter what that narcissist, megalomaniac James Comey says. Where's James Comey today, by the way? Where is he at? What country is he in? Where's he running his mouth off at?
I really don't know. You know? He may have gone back to work for HSBC, because that's where he was before he went to the FBI. He was on the board of directors when they got caught laundering drug money.
Yeah, I know that, but I'm saying, he's been on his book tour still, and he was in Europe running his mouth. Yep. He's still doing it, isn't he?
Well,
okay.
He's not getting a lot of attention. Same thing with Hillary and her book tour.
Right. Right. Dan Bongino, he's only going to let you loose so much information. It doesn't matter, no matter what he knows, he's still getting a paycheck from the corporate media. If he starts running his mouth a little too much, he's going to lose that job, and you won't need him as a guest, Mike. He's going to be asking you for employment. So he can only tell you so much. He can only tell you so much, because he's in there. Either, you know what, you can't say this, you can't say that, you can't say this. So he's got to stay within those bounds, just like the rest of them. You know what I mean? Like the colonels and all the rest of them. They can only say so much. Remember what happened to, what's his name? The judge. Remember when they said, the judge said this, and he was off the air, and then he was redeemed? Judge from Fox.
Napolitano.
Judge, Napolitano, and then he opened his mouth and he said a little too much. I forget exactly what it was, and then all of a sudden he disappeared, and then he got redeemed, and they brought him back. Well, that's the same thing that could happen to any one of them. I remember Tucker Carlson. Same thing happened to Tucker Carlson.
Yes.
When he started getting into the Syria issue. They're like, no, dude, you can't go that far. You can't do it, dude. And so he took a nice little vacation, you know, and then it was same thing with Dan Bongino. So your friend over there, Dan Bongino, is going to give you a nice little narrative, and he's going to tell you a lot of things. He's going to tell you about relevant corporate media information. But if you want the real stuff, you got to be at Republic Broadcasting or, you know, some of our other niche places. SGT reports really good. X22 reports really good, you know, so on and down the line, you know, Lisa Haven, Liz Crokin, you name it. You know what I mean? But when you deal with these mainstream characters, expect mainstream stuff. Right?
Okay.
All right, very good, my friend. Take care. Y'all be good. Bye.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go, and the phone lines are open again. All right, getting on back to the world of computers. Apparently, over in Great Britain, cyber criminals, malware, what have you, knocked out the National Health System computers for 1,300 hours over 36 months. And that's a lot of downtime. Nearly a third of the trusts, 25 out of 80, that responded to a request from Intercity Technology admitted they had experienced outages across their IT systems between January 2015 and February 2018. They're calling it a Digi blackout. And apparently, a lot of it was the WannaCry ransomware. Others were Locky and Zepto malware. In one case, the systems were offline for 2 weeks. People's lives are at stake here. When these cyber criminals are going after hospital systems, they are putting people at risk because all the medical records are computerized. All right, let's take another phone call. Fred in Michigan, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey there, Mike. Remember my expression, what in the Fukushima Sam hell's going on, man? I saw some astonishing presentation. You know, all this stuff about Russia, what do we call it, Russiagate?
That's what they're trying to call it,
yeah. Yeah, all right. Man, there's this guy, was it Aim for Truth? AimForTruth.org. It's American Intelligence Media.
Yes.
They have a big YouTube presence. Okay. Douglas Gabriel. He used to be in some yeah, that's right. He used to be with the NSA. Douglas Gabriel, and he was a Jesuit. All right. And he, man, if you haven't heard SES Circle, Senior Executive Service, it's like a totally independent, autonomous federal conglomerate of 10,000 plus agents that control all
it's the
federal
bureaucracy.
Contracts.
It's the bureaucracy.
Through DOJ, there's 500 Bar Esquire attorneys at DOJ. They control SES, Senior Executive Service. Circle is this UK-based transnational entity that interfaces with SES and DOJ, and they are responsible for facilitating all of the war activities, all of the contracts with the contractors who just interestingly happen to be in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, which is why all the F-35s, which we were told were so, faulty, that they all had to be shipped out to Israel. Now
that's not accurate. Israel has bought some F-35s, but the majority of the F-35s remain here in the United States. They're still faulty.
They are, but Mike, they're probably being sold to Israel at what, a dime on the dollar or something.
It's happened before.
When I saw heard Ellen Sabrowski about 9/11. Israel did 9/11. All the proof. And then he does another one called AIPAC, what treason looks like. AIPAC, what treason looks like. And then the other one, America, Israel's whore. Okay, this is a guy, a very honorable Hebrew American, Marine Corps vet, U.S. Army War College PhD, big time position with them. He got all kinds of awards. Okay, he says, man, Israel, we got to stop funding Israel. He says they are our greatest enemy. They're not our... Mike, what do we need an ally for in Africa anyway? Why? And speaking of Fox, this blew my mind back in January. On Fox, I saw the declaration that our military occupies, according to Fox, 190 countries. We have over 900 foreign military bases. Why don't we do what Ron Paul? We need to start holding town hall meetings. This is what I plan to do. We need to shut off corporate welfare taxpayer contributions to Israel, and we stop that. We shut off all the foreign military bases, bring all the troops home out of 190 countries, okay? And, hey, why don't we use our own troops to seal off the border? We'll make a wall. I
agree with that last one. Because, with Mexico's new president is saying that the Mexican people have a natural right to come to the United States. And you just know it's going to trigger a new surge of illegals. So we need to do something at that border.
Absolutely. And I'm even for building a moat. Fill it with crocodiles, man. Okay? Yep. We'll do the Crocodile Dundee scenario. But I got to ask you, Mike, okay? What do you think about people? There's this very honorable Hebrew American fellow, Joseph Davis, jdavismemphis.com. I don't know if it's daily, but he hosts like a roundtable discussion. It's called Talpiot Talk, TALPIOT Talk.com, TalpiotTalk.com. And in the number 2 presentation, they bring out the fact, Mike, did you hear about Senate 2497? Senate 2497, the U.S.-Israel Security Authorization Act of 2018. It's carte blanche. Whatever Israel wants or dreams up in terms of national security, U.S. Congress says, okay, whatever. Here it is. That's S2497. And then they got this anti-Semitism proposal where if I or you or John or whomever criticizes Israel on very substantive, verifiable basis, well, we're engaged in hate crime speech, right? Hate crime speech. And we're gonna be, hauled off in shackles for that. Can you believe it? They're actually proposing that.
Yeah, they are. It's facing an uphill fight. And again, if Trump gets an ultra-conservative onto that Supreme Court bench, they'll strike this law down. It clearly is a violation of the First Amendment right to freedom of speech.
And Mike, I got to leave you with something. There's a fellow on the Big Island, perhaps Michael Sella. Have you ever heard of Michael Sella, PhD?
No.
Michael Sella. It's called. I want you to check it out, man, because it's right. It pertains to this volcanic morass. Okay.
Yes.
And Michael Sella, PhD, he does a presentation based on seismographic data, etc. There's some geothermal venture right in the same proximity where all of this activity originated, erupted. And in the presentation, Mike, it blew my mind. This is a Michael Sella PhD. This is no run-of-the-mill, wannabe. This guy said that, you got to hear it with your own ears, but I'm going to tell the audience. CIA, he said, CIA actually, they launched apparently some kind of like a tactical nuke missile that was directed to Hawaii. It was intercepted and terminated by some Patriot Air Force contingent, all right? And this is coming from Michael Sella, PhD, and his sources in Hawaii, who said CIA was in the process. They had launched a tactical missile to do some big-time damage in Hawaii, and it was intercepted and terminated.
Well, that's one explanation for that alert we got on our cell phones the other day, because we still don't have the straight story on that. And when it all was happening, people were talking about, a false flag to say that North Korea had attacked Hawaii and the war was going to be on.
There you go. Mike, it's called exopolitics.org. That's his site. I just remembered it. Exopolitics, exopolitics.org, okay?
Okay. All right, well...
And don't forget, telpiattalk.com. Joseph Davis would make an excellent, or Jeremy Kushel, he's another honorable Hebrew American. These guys are brilliant. They would make excellent guests, Mike, okay?
All right, well, thanks an awful lot here. We're going to have to let you go. We've got a commercial break. We've got one more caller waiting on the line, and we'll be back with that caller and the last segment of our program today after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Now, yesterday, July 1st, was Canada Day, and up in British Columbia, near the town of, the peak, Pennask Summit, they actually got snow. Don't tell Al Gore. He'll be so disappointed. All righty, we're going to grab a quick call from Mateus in Canada. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, calling from British Columbia, Canada.
Okay.
The Swedish half of them are afraid of the illegals after dark, and the other half are afraid of them before dark. I wanted to mention about the most dangerous drug in the world. The documentaries about this. It comes from a tree somewhere, and the scenario of the documentary was that this man, the victim, had it blown in his face off of a newspaper from the perpetrator, and then you're so easily suggested that they just said, let's just empty your apartment. And so he helped them empty his apartment, and then the next day he came off the drug, came back to an empty suite, called the police, and a bellboy told them, what are you talking about? You just moved out yesterday. And so this kind of drug could be used for the mass shooters to say, okay, go to the Batman movie, shoot the place up, and go sit at the car and wait for us.
Mm-hmm. You're right. It could.
Yeah, and then the other thing I wanted to mention is that regarding your Musk story about possible sabotage, or the question of that,
yes.
I'm convinced that he is under sabotage, and I never mentioned this before because it's not usually your topic, but I studied really closely the video evidence of one of his missiles being somehow destroyed by an object that flew by very close, very fast, just before it blew up. And people are saying UFO, but from your perspective, that would be, if it really happened, that would be, some sort of like secret tech that is not normally disclosed. And it kind of fits into my larger understanding that we have this two-tier civilization where the regular NASA space program, especially the fact that it's been shut down, that's for the retail, that's for the public. But I'm convinced that there is like an elite space program, very small, where it's being kept hidden, that there is some space accessibility that exists currently for the elite. And they don't like competition of like one of the people having a competitive space program. And so they may have unveiled one of the 30 years in advance weapons systems to just, sabotage this guy.
Well, the problem with that is, of course, obviously, once the Musk's rocket exploded, it would be very closely examined to try and find out what went wrong, at which point any indications of an impact would immediately be visible. Now, it's no secret that the U.S. military maintains its own space program in parallel with NASA. But again, I tend to think, I know the video you're talking about, I think it was just a bird flying by very close to the lens is why it looked really fast. But I think in the end it was just rockets do blow up. I mean, you go back to the early days of NASA. They had a lot of these things that went wrong.
I don't think it was an impact. I think it was like some sort of like a frequency that was able to detonate the explosives inside. But anyways, it's just all theory. Who knows?
Yeah, it is all just theory here. Anyway, there's the music. I got to let you go. Please stay tuned for John Stedmiller. I'm sure he's got a lot of stuff to share with you. Please take what you learn here and on the website, share it with everybody that you know. Use email, use text, use face-to-face. Bring back the art of the conversation. Just stay off the corporate social media. It is being totally, totally filtered. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.